You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Man, you ever just like you're living your life on a day-to-day basis and you're like, I feel unhealthy. Like I feel like my body's trying to tell me to stop doing everything that I'm doing.
So I did the math just now, and I like projected out the rest of my flight schedule for the rest of the year. By the time I get to, so this is factoring in 2 weeks at the end of the year that don't have travel. So this is like not 2 weeks, like 9 days. I'll have been on an airplane every 105 hours
Okay.
on average. I'll have been getting onto the interval in between my flights this year. I'll finish with 83 flights in 365 days, which averages out to a little more than 4 1/3, or a little under 4 1/3, which is
There has to be
105 hours.
very few people on this planet that fly more than you.
Pilots, I would assume, but I don't know if they have like some sort of like rotation, like firefighters, like they work for 2 days on and then they take like a week off.
I'd imagine they regulate the amount that they can be in the air because like there's only so many stimulants you could take before you're irresponsibly driving a plane.
Right. So I know that it's 12 hours. So it matters per duration of flight, but the shortest turnaround for a pilot, like I've picked up clients from the private airstrip, and the quickest they could turn around with the same pilot is 12 hours. So you arrive at 10, you're leaving at 10. That's like the rule. That's like excuse me. That's kind of like the hard and fast rule. But yeah, so the thing is, I've never not felt that. I just feel it now for different reasons. I used to feel it now for the reasons that you're feeling, or I used to feel it then for the reasons you're feeling it now. But now I'm embarking on a whole new experience of unhealthy. And yeah, I don't know what it would feel like. People use words like vibrant or spry. And I was like, I theoretically know what those words mean, but I don't understand because I haven't experienced that feeling. Like I don't know what that is.
Yeah. I don't know how I would feel vibrant either, but I think that's just a personality thing for me.
What would when I guess have you felt the most unhealthy? Like maybe defined as the nearest to death. Like I was hospitalized in 26, 27. That I was like, oh, okay, we're done here. Have you had any moments of like, I get this weird heart flutter thing, like this double bass situation, like a Slipknot solo, like I get that every now and then. I'm so used to it where I'm like, that's probably nothing. Have you had any like, 911 is dialed on the phone and you're like, I don't know what the next 10 seconds is going to look like?
To be honest, I don't think that I have. I spent a lot of my early life, like probably through about 22 years old, essentially trying to see if I could die or not. So there were points in there that like the lifestyle was unhealthy. Like I was doing a lot of just unsafe things and things that were not good for my health. But it was like,
can you elaborate on
high
that?
risk,
like
no reward type shit,
or like alcohol? Like what are we got? Pabst Blue Ribbon? Are you jumping out of buildings? Is it both? Like,
yeah. A lot of it was just lifestyle, man. Like I grew up in a place where there's not shit to do. So like you find shit to do, but like a lot of that involves drinking. A lot of that involves like talking shit, getting in fights. There was a period of time that I was in Pennsylvania that I carried a gun regularly. Like,
holy shit. How old were you?
Yeah. It was legal. That probably sounds bad, especially to someone in Canada where people just don't carry guns.
No, that given the context of the situation, you're not going to Pennsylvania your way out of this one. That's like definitely,
yeah.
Because that's like, there's Schultz does a joke on the MAGA hat about like people choosing violence because that's the last thing you put on before you leave the house. I would argue that the strap is probably in that conversation of like keys, wallet, Glock.
Oh yeah,
right. So like there is a conscious
sure.
decision when you're putting your shoes on that I wish a motherfucker would. Like that is subliminally or consciously the thought you go like, today's the day that I'm gonna pop one in a motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not necessarily speaking for myself, but a lot of people that I've known to carry guns, like they know the law better than lawyers. And they don't know the law because they want to protect. I mean, yeah, they want to protect themselves, but they want to justify shooting someone.
Sure.
So it's like people carry a gun for the opportunity to use it, which isn't necessarily why I
their
carry
speed
one.
dial is 1 is the NRA and then 2 is 911. Like that's how speed dial in Pennsylvania works. It's like NRA, 911, maybe the pastor or minister at the local church, and then maybe the guy's wife. Like that's probably the order of operations.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my old man has an insurance through the NRA where if you shoot someone, they'll defend you. It's wild.
You know what they say? Necessity
There's
is
parts
the
of the
mother
country
of
that are
all
like
creation.
this.
That's fucking wild, dog. That is.
We should have had this talk before you lived in Florida, man.
No,
Florida's
I'm glad we
like.
didn't. I'm glad we didn't, dude. I'm definitely
Yeah,
glad we didn't.
I guess that's true.
Which isn't ironic. We've had this
that's
conversation a few times on the podcast before about like understanding relative risk. Now, people can talk about, what is the big one now? Microplastics or something like that. You know who doesn't give a fuck about microplastics? People in the south side of Chicago, right? Because they're worried about shrapnel. Like microplastics in your Dasani water bottle is not nearly as big an issue as a stray up on the block that fucking nicks you. Like that's relative risk, right? There's nothing that gets me like the the N95 mask with no helmet on the motorized scooter in the middle of a street. It's like you're someone who doesn't understand the idea of relative and absolute risk, right? Like you're trying to not get a runny nose when you're about to be the hood ornament for a Mercedes. Like it's just, you're missing a few things, homie. Like lose the mask, get a bus pass. Now we're in a better place. Bus pass, you're probably less likely to die of something going around than you are per the numbers of you zipping around town on a scooter, right? So, health is, it's never not a topic of conversation, which I think makes it an interesting constant in the public discourse, because for as long as we were aware of our mortality, we've been attempting to prolong it. You look at the lifespan across the ages now. And it's so much so that our lifespan is expanded. We're now in a generation which might not see a lifespan that precedes or that exceeds the predecessor, right? I think that's a unique feature of today's current health status, but there is a aggressive shift in the conversation to push that. The longevity market is very emergent, and there are a lot of people looking to not only improve lifespan but health span, which I think is things that need to be a separate conversation. But it is such a relative term, right? So I guess when we think of health, because if you don't think of health relatively, you can actually end up on the wrong side of it. And it's something that I see with so much of the public discourse around health being driven by those a little bit further on in their years. What I see with our peers, and for those listening at home, Jordan and I are born in 1990, which makes us, we're going on to 35. What I see at our peers at 35 years and younger is they're really heeding the warnings from people older for people older. And it's like the best asset you have is operating the relative best, the relative best practices to your particular demographic, right? So, we have, I think, a good buffer of time to not have to abide by some of the guiding principles that are really being shouted from the metaphorical mountaintop that affect people who, rightfully so, if the podcast audience is 50 plus, it's just going to be a different type of conversation, right? And not to say that any of the things might be net negative, like deploying a strategy to improve your health that is meant for that of a 55-year-old when you're 30. It's not like it's going to be bad, but you may be succumbing to opportunity costs that could be time could be spent working on attributes of your health that you have the opportunity to really push forward now that you won't have the ability to push forward then. And creating that buffer of, strength or function or endurance are ones that come to mind, will make it so that you don't have to feel compelled to succumb to these practices when you're in your mid 50s, right? A lot of the narratives, and I hate the word, but a lot of the conversations, let's say, around health, wellness, and longevity that's being espoused by older population for the older population is being espoused for an older population that didn't start paying attention to health until yesterday, right? Until right now, right? So you see people who are well entrenched in the fitness space, who are, athletic and to all markers healthy, and we can discuss what those markers may be. We see them starting to deploy these practices being espoused by people in their mid 50s and sometimes older, for people in their mid 50s and sometimes older who have zero baseline of health and fitness. So I see, and it's to no fault of the people espousing the information, right? They understand the demographic that they're speaking to. They're providing a ton of value to this underserviced market. But the fact that that market has been underserviced is guiding the content and recommendations of these podcasters, influencers, whatever. But so don't come in as, an adult, a fucking, in some cases, like a kid. Well, I would figure like an early 20-year-old as a kid, and start adopting the practices of someone declining in their years who has not had the upper hand in building a base of health and fitness that you have, right? It's like you purposefully going back to go and not collecting $200. It's like, dude, if you're on the straightaway and you're making some serious progress, you might not want to apply these very regressed principles to your physiology. Again, no net negative to be had, potentially some novel, stimulus adaptation of these practices. But the opportunity cost of not leaning into the thing that you can really lean into now, I think, is really going to have a detrimental effect long term. It's like, man, you should have got it when the getting was good, right? And because you can't go back, right? That arrow of time keeps flying, and once your 20s pass you up, it's going to be different than your 30s and your 40s. And like, I'm not the type of guy to be like, man, back in my day, like, you and I still get after it day in, day out. We got some dents in the fender, but like, we understand that arrow of time and we maximize what we can at the intersection that we're at, right? We don't start deploying these down the road and regressive protocols to us because they're like, we're not the audience for that. It's crazy to see. It's good to see, but it's crazy to see the evolution of the health conversation in media. It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And I think health is becoming very mainstream right now. And that's right now, maybe in the last, I'd say 10 years, 10, 15 years. And before that, it wasn't really a mainstream conversation. Like health was handled by doctors in a medical setting. And I think there's been probably even the last 10 years, like a kind of this separation of like the medical setting. Like if you're managing your health in a medical setting, that's probably because you're unhealthy, right? You've probably tipped the tables. You've gone from the healthy side of that spectrum to the side that you're probably closer to sick than you are healthy, and you're managing symptoms of that sickness. And a lot of like traditional medicine, that's what it ends up being is diagnosis and treatment. And treatment at that point is you're receiving treatment because there's an issue, because something has gone wrong, that you are no longer healthy. And a lot of that treatment is symptom management. It's not typically treatment of the cause. Because if we look at health in a more broad sense, like we can look there are more objective markers we can look at. Like we can look at blood labs, we can look at like different organ systems, like how's the heart functioning, kidneys, liver. We can look at like blood pressure, cholesterol, things like this. We've found pretty strong correlations to longevity and some of these values you can find on blood labs. Aside from that, there's like immunity and digestion are both closely linked together. Like how resilient are you to fight off a disease? Like if you catch a cold, how long does it take before you can kick it? Like how susceptible are you to these things? Like if you get to the point where you're managing these through kind of traditional medicine and prescriptions, and you're probably already sick. And that was kind of like that, literally healthcare of 20 years ago. That was kind of the system. It's like you get sick, you go to the doctor, they make your symptoms go away, you're good until you're not, and then you go back, and then you get diabetes, and then you die, or they cut off your leg or some shit. But now I think the reason it's becoming more mainstream is because people are starting to focus on the things that are going to keep you healthy before you need medical intervention, right? And there's a lot better understanding. There's a lot more public knowledge. You don't have to go to your GP now to get blood labs done because something's wrong. Like, you can get them done, shout out Marek Health. I think they're still our sponsor.
They're doing good work.
Right. Right. But you can, like, there's a lot of online like lab services you can go, and you can get like blood labs done in more of a preventative way. Like, you can start to understand health markers sooner before something goes wrong. So you can pick up things before you're, say, out of range on cholesterol, or before something has gone wrong that needs medical intervention. And then you can start to take steps in terms of lifestyle, in terms of dietary intervention, because that to me is why health has become so mainstream, is because there's now there's a lot more knowledge around what it takes to actually maintain health, as opposed to going in and going to a doctor once you're already sick and trying to backtrack once you've already gotten to the place where health has declined.
Forecasting here. Gonna call a prediction. Put this in a time capsule. So I was on my phone, apologies, but I was looking up the blue zones in the world. So blue zones, for those of you unfamiliar, and I could be bastardizing this, but it's to my understanding, correct me if you have a different working definition of blue zone, that a blue zone is a part of the world where centenarians, people who live over 100 years old of age, are disproportionate. Would you define that? Is that a working definition of blue zone?
I've never heard that before.
Oh, you've never heard it? Okay, so there's a term in epidemiology called a blue zone, which is the point which you have a higher than usual people living. I think it's 100, right? So blue zones are regions where a higher than usual number of people live much longer than average. So Loma Linda in the United States, looks like it's somewhere near San Diego. Nicoya, Costa Rica. Sardinia in Italy. Icaria in Greece. And Okinawa in Japan. What I think is going to happen, because like the problem that I think we're going to miss, and the problem that I see when I think about relative risk, especially with our population, like I'm going to talk to our people, like if you're a male, and I'm not doing this like Instagram profile bullshit, like you're a male between fucking 20 and 85 and you have a foot, like I'm your coach for you or whatever. Like the relative risk of health at our age, I'm going to go, what do you think gets guys at our age? I'm going to look this up because I don't know.
It's got to be car accidents.
That's
got to be the number one killer.
most Pennsylvania shit I've ever heard. That or getting shot by your fucking neighbor.
Right. No, it's got to be a traumatic accident. Like at 35, like you should be pretty healthy.
So what are we looking at? We're looking at leading causes of death. Males. Let's go like 20 to 40. Let's see what the old Google has for us. Okay, top 10 causes of death. Americans 20 to 24. Okay, 2024. Unintentional injuries, number 1. Number 2. Take a wild guess what number 2 is. Exactly what I thought.
I don't know. I'm
smiling, but I shouldn't be, because we joke about it every day, and sometimes we're not joking.
Oh, fuck. It's suicide.
Yeah. So, but like, here's the thing. And I don't think you and I have healthy lives. You try and kill yourself with weights every day. I hope a plane goes down, knock on wood, every 4 days. But look, in order of priority, in getting your shit together, in being healthy as someone our age, sorting out that variable, apparently, statistically, according to this fucking website, and according to like the people I know who I don't know anymore because they're not here, maybe it's okay to lose a bit of sleep. maybe it's okay to like, the thumbs up shit's got to go. But like, I don't catch a lot of flack, but people worry about my health, which I'm like, thank you. But I tell you one thing, like, as crazy as the lifestyle can get, when I know, like, my great grandma lived to 106, and she's someone where like she kind of broke the mold. Not that I'm from a blue zone, but I have a lot of relatives that live quite old. Like I have 4 or 5 that lived in well into their 90s. Her daughter, my mom's mother, lived to 98. Right. So there's a part of health that I think in the long term, when we eclipse sort of the low hanging fruit of the biomarker, right? Like, hey, your fucking albumin levels are through the roof. What is going on? Okay, let's sort this out. People are still going to die, right? But people sort out albumin levels and so they're still going to die. Where it's like, okay, people in the south side of Chicago are not worried about microplastics because they're worried about bullets. If you're between 20 and 30, your primary concern of your health should be setting up your life to be fulfilling. And sure, blood pressure, blood glucose, especially if you're banging gear, especially if you're training really hard, especially if you're pushing the envelope physically. But it's like sometimes, and I see this all the time, I see people who have bought into what is now the conventional, albeit 10 years ago, the alternative way of managing their health. And they're still missing the point. I see 24-year-olds going to saunas and cold plunges 3 times a week, but like talking about their trauma. And I'm like, my guy, like, you're going to neck yourself with that fucking little beaded necklace if you don't actually get your ass to work. And the comparison is no difference in the microplastics and the bullets. It's like, if it's number 2 on the list, right? And it's not fucking heart disease, then don't worry about systemic inflammation in your 20s. Worry about making it to your 30s and look at the numbers. If number 2 is extension cord in the garage, then what is the antidote to that is not sunshine up your fucking asshole every morning. The antidote to that is making yourself a useful person. And I can't sensitively have this conversation with any one individual person that I think needs to hear it, because obviously it's a difficult thing to hear. But like, if we're looking at the statistics and we're talking about health for our demographic, which I think is useful, get your fucking ass to fucking work. That is, but it's like, again, if people hear that and they're like, well, like LDL, it's like, my guy, like, sure, yes, but LDL doesn't keep the fucking, the LDL doesn't close the garage door when you start the car, right? Like, LDL is not going to be the thing. And I see people suffer, and the antidote is get the fuck out of the cold tub. The antidote to their affliction is get less sleep, because you're up working on something, right? Like, take liberties while you can to offset where the Grim Reaper is hiding behind the corner that you're adjacent to. And, it will be seen and perceived as a bit of an ethereal conversation, but it's no different than in the demographic. If we were to look up, what the average or the leading cause of death was from Americans between 50 and 65, maybe colorectal cancer is somewhere on that list for males, probably within the top 10, or some type of cancer for sure in the top 5. And the recommendation for most people, it's like, oh, that's going to kill you. So you get prostate exams, I think, starting at I think it's down now. I think it's actually at 50. And no one bats an eye at that. But it's like, when someone's like going to work with like the briefcase and the noose, and it's like, well, hey, maybe you should screen for that. And like in the intersection of the digital fitness, entrepreneurship, fucking soup of ideas that we have going on, it's like a lot of lazy motherfuckers that are with 120 over 80 playing Russian roulette with a fucking snub nose revolver every night. And it's just like that is as much a prescription of health as anything. If statistically those are the markers, and it's a tough thing to hear, but it's like, that's the metaphorical hard pill to swallow, because we get so hyper focused on the physiological sides, which there's components to it obviously, but like the antidote to that one is like less sleep. Find something not worth sleeping, or find a rock, push it uphill until you can't, and keep doing it.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy that I didn't realize that was the number 2 killer of, like, people in that demographic, and I mean, it makes sense, like, I think a lot of people are very complicit, like, complacent, and don't have a lot of purpose and meaning in their life, and this is something that, like, maybe for once I'll say in a more delicate way is that, like, I don't even think it's, like, getting your ass up and going to work, but it's, like, finding something to get your ass up for. Like, you need to have purpose, you need to have meaning, and, like, I'm very grateful that a lot of that for me is like what we do. And like I do find that in work and like in my career and the people that I get to work with, like that gives me a ton of purpose and a ton of meaning. And that's like, you know, there's been, I'm not saying that like I've had the noose around my neck or anything, but that we've been through some fucking hard times. Like I've been through some hard times, and it's like, you know, if there's something pulling you forward, you have something that you're working for, something that's bigger than you even, then that's going to be the thing that like that keeps you going. And like alongside of that, I've been generally healthy most of my life. Like no, like I haven't ever really been hospitalized outside of like broken bones and shit. But like the biggest thing that I've went out of my way to spend money on in my 30s has been therapy and like going to therapy and like getting my head right. And that's been probably the most beneficial thing for me in terms of like just day to day, like being in a good place mentally, which is, you know, you either stack the W's or you stack the L's in that column. And like, it sounds like the people stacking the L's, they're finding a way out. But that's something that, like, if you invest in that, that's like, that's probably one of the hardest things I've done is like go to therapy willingly and then actually like do the work in therapy. And that's the type of yeah, right. Is you can't just go to therapy and like cry and be okay. Like you got to fucking put it into practice. But like that, this took a turn way different than where I thought it was going to go. But like that, there's no other way that you can define health at this age if those are the statistics. Like, don't let your buddy drive and go see a therapist.
Right. Yeah. 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 Hey, get down from there. Or like, yo, the
Yeah.
cops are coming. That's still, but and
Right.
that's the, like, I just think the conversation is so beat to death around LDL ratios and
Yeah.
HbA1c. It's like, yo, dog, are you joking me? Do you know how fucking, like, with that type of shit, how hard you are to kill in your 20s?
Yeah.
Like physiologically, like, you know, I know a couple
Yeah.
dudes that have had heart attacks late 20s. Like
Right.
but when I thought I was having a heart attack, it was fucking panic attacks because my head was so cooked. Right. So it's
Right.
like, and I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying fucking, you know, bang fucking trend at a gram a week for a year or anything like that, just because you have this buffer. Like, be smart on that side. Like, you know, you mortgage your time here, man. Like that payment's coming up, and how much interest you want to pay on the decisions you make in your 20s and 30s. But understand your monthly dues when you're in your 20s and 30s are far less weighted towards the physical, right? Like, you
Right.
set yourself up right, man. You know, if things go according to plan, you know what zone 2 cardio I'm going to do? Just biking around some fucking neighborhood, you know? And it's like, okay, you can withstand the stress now, but it's like, I just feel, and again, it's no fault of the people putting the information out there, but like, look at the population pyramid of the developed world. Like, look where the bulk of the people are, right? Like, it's fucking boomers. That's
Yeah.
why they're called boomers. There was a boom of them. And all of them were like, yo, fuck that, man. I ain't having a bunch of kids like my goddamn Irish Catholic parents. So it's like you have this log jam of people getting into their, you know, their later years of their life. And obviously, by the numbers of that, the largest audience to potentially consume information is going to be the audience where the most amount of people are. There's just not
Mhm.
enough alive people in their 20s and 30s compared to alive people in their 50s and 60s. So it's like, as a business ploy, whether it's a ploy or not, a byproduct of this demographic composition, of course, the most popular things in the world, or in the developed world, or in North America, Canada, the US, you know, UK and otherwise, are going to speak to the largest audience because there's the most of them to listen and consume the content. So like, just by quite literally digital natural selection, they are going to ascend to the top of these mediums. But if you're someone who consumes this type of media, but you're not of, you know, the demographic of the target audience, you might want to be clear or be cautious in focusing on some of these things. Like I know, guy, 24-year-old kid. What about Tongat Ali? Who's that? Who is Tongat? Is he related to Muhammad? Like, what is? It's an increase in. I mean, my guy. Like, go out and go to a bar and try and work an angle. Maybe you go home with someone, get in the fight. Get punch someone back, win a few, lose a few, get your licks, go to work on no sleep, throw up in the fucking bathroom toilet at work, rally, get back up on the ladder, take out the fucking rat traps, take out the trash, go meet up with your boys, do it again. And then do that for like a year if you're 20 years old. And then fucking we'll check your testosterone again. I guarantee you, like going out and just being amongst it is going to up your test more, or you're just going to get your fucking nose broken a bunch of times. But like it's like the lifestyle that people, they nerf their physiology with their psychology. And there's a positive feedback loop in both directions, right? We see it all the time with like resistance training in older populations. It's like, oh, I feel more confident and I feel better. It's like, okay, yeah, that started with an output to drive input. But when you're younger, it's like your inputs now are driving your outputs, right? So it's like the input of your mindset and your hyper cautious nature of the way you live your life starts to suppress your outputs, and then that suppression is cyclical. And now all of a sudden you're systemically down regulated because your thought leader in your the health part of your life is someone in their mid 50s. And it's like, don't like you wouldn't run an exercise program for someone. You shouldn't. Although people fucking do. Like someone the other day was like, yeah, I'm going to go for a ruck. I'm like, you're going to go for a what? Like, dog, you are 25 years old. You know what I called a ruck? Getting to school. That was a ruck for me. And you know what I didn't call it? A ruck. I was like, yeah, I have to go to school. I have a heavy backpack and I walk.
Yeah, homie, you want to ruck? Join the army.
Yeah, no. Yeah, there you go. You want to up your testosterone? Those motherfuckers. We got enough jarheads that listen to this podcast that'll sort out your testosterone real quick. Yeah, it's just like, but I heard like you're 24 years old. You want to go for a hike with your girl? Call it a hike, right? Mm-hmm. But don't make it up to be something, right? Like, fuck, dude. It's just, but therein lies the problem. It's like we are painting the veneer of effort over low effort tasks. It's like there used to be walking to school. Now it's like a thing that you're gonna, go on Strava and then post about the walk you went on. Are you fucking joking me? Like, but then it's the same guy that's like, oh man, like, my cortisol is a little high. I should probably cut back on my rucking. Like, dude, I don't want to say it because it's not in line with the conversation, but like, I'm saying this jokingly, kill yourself. And by that, I mean, do something really hard that you might actually die, because rucking is not upping your cortisol. But they just buy into this perpetual cycle of like, I need to recover more. It's like, no, homie, you don't need less backpack walks and more cold plunges, dog. Like, you need to put the backpack down. You need to find your testicles in the bottom of said backpack, reattach them to your body, and then go do something that's actually difficult.
Right.
It's insane. But it's like, I couldn't in good faith sit here and perpetuate the inane conversations of health without discussing the massive elephant in the room. It's like, if you don't get that shit sorted out, when you can sort it out, you're going to have a very uphill battle of fighting both the physical and the psychological. It's almost like plate spinning. It's like, if you can get this shit sorted, you can get enough momentum. When you're older and these things are sort of the inevitable byproducts of time passing, you're going to have a very fortified position with one of your major pillars of health. And you can lean on that in times where you're like, the more you can instantiate that into your practice, the more solid it becomes as something that you can lean on. And it becomes more solid the more you lean on it, because you have more proof of your ability to do hard things when things get hard, right? Like, we are a mental callus, you and I. Like the shit that crosses our desk, which collectively we just laugh now. We're just like, okay, whatever. But it comes from not like, I know people who start businesses and business ownership, it's not for everyone. I'll give it that. Some days I don't think it's for me, honestly. And you know this, you're the one that fucking deals with my like, yo, this is it. Like a fucking snap it up. How many times have I text you and be like, this is the one, I'm not booking a return trip. Like I'm not coming back.
It's
Like
been
in the
more
last
and more lately.
dude, but it's like now is the time. So and look, I think it is worthwhile to potentially talk about health markers, but I want to put the first things first because I know the people that listen to the pod, and it's the people who are health conscious, right? But it's like you got to hear that lesson, dog. Like you just gotta put yourself through something that you don't think you could do, and that'll be the thing that fortifies you physically and psychologically, and then there's you set that loop into motion of positive health ramifications.
Right. Yeah. I love a good plate spinning reference, but like honestly, it is just like stacking habits because if you don't have a capacity to deal with stress, and that's what a lot of the psychological stuff comes down to, it's like, okay, you encounter a stressor, you freak out because you don't know how to handle that or how to respond to that properly, and then you just have stress because you have this thing that's stressful that you don't know how to deal with. So like quite literally, it's like adapting to stress is the name of the entire game. So if you can get your head right early on and you can understand like whether it's a physical stressor, a psychological stressor, then if that's something that you can learn how to deal with and you can take that stress and you can manage it and you can respond to it in the appropriate way, that's going to be the thing that sets you up to have these healthy habits for a lifetime. Because how many people do you know that are our age that are like just so avoidant of responsibility because of the stress that responsibility gives them? Is they don't know how to deal with it, they don't know how to follow through on tasks, they don't know how to do what they're saying. So I see more and more of that because it's so easy to be coddled and to be alive nowadays, that's why like these people are living longer and longer, and they're trying to figure out how to stay healthy into their 80s, 90s, hundreds, because it's so easy to be alive and you don't even have to be that healthy to be alive. But I think the other side of that, like on that near end of the spectrum, is that people don't have to encounter the stressors of life at the same rate that they would when, say, even they were our parents' age. Like people aren't getting thrown out of their house at 18. Like go get a job, find a wife, and make a kid, like figure it out. And then you have to go fucking figure it out. It's like there's people like into their late 20s, their 30s, like living with their parents, just kind of not really finding that direction. Like if you can put yourself into a stressful scenario earlier on, the sooner you're exposed to that, the sooner you learned how to adapt to that. And you start to deal with those psychological stressors and you understand like, yo, life is just a ton of fucking psychological stressors that you have to deal with. And if you can't cut it, then, you either need to figure it out or you don't, but that's on you to figure it out. So the sooner you can get exposed to those, the sooner you'll understand how you can sort those out and how you can deal with those. And then that conversation's done. Like you have that skill. Let's move on to the next one. Let's stack these habits. Now our habits are easy. It's like, oh, I just need to eat vegetables and exercise 3 times a week. Like, yeah, until you're in your 40s, like that's health. That's going to set you on a good enough trajectory. And then later on, once you have some of these other stressors, like you have a career, you figure out your living situation, your family situation, like then maybe focus a little bit more on your omega-3s and whatever the fuck other supplements old people take. But early on, it's just understanding how to deal with stress, because that's the rest of your life. And if you don't equip yourself with that skill, then you're just gonna be stuck there. You're spinning your wheels.
Yeah, and I want to be clear that the skill that you need to acquire is identifying the next worthy stressful endeavor. It's that is the fundamental, in my opinion, more so than the dealing with stress. It's the seeking out of stress that on the other side of it yield. Because if that's the habit you get into, like rather than getting in the habit of reflexively and reactively getting better at dealing with stress that comes your way, there will be a point where things get a little bit chill. right? Like inevitably. And the earlier you start, and I think there's some points of clarification that I want to make is, the earlier you start, there's two variables here, right? We're just going to equate age with ability, right? So although those two things don't always run together, right? I know people who've been on their own since 12, and I know people who are in their 20s who are incapable. Now, for whatever reason, genetic or whatever, these people at 12 years old, they had the ability far beyond their years. But let's just say your age and ability are the same thing. So depending on what age you are when you start this endeavor, you have to make sure that you are capable of overcoming it. This is tough. And you know how you find out? By picking something and failing. And then you're like, well, that was too much. Hi, I'm married at, 25. Divorced not long after that. Like, took a shot. It was like, yo, not even close. Not even close to being in the ballpark. But I took the shot. Now, that's a point of calibration, right? And it's like, but where I see people go wrong is, they set too lofty of goals. And look, set as lofty a goal as you want. Set a goal so big that you're almost guaranteed you're going to fail, but be okay with failing, right? Like, you got to have it. Like, some people I know, like, they order the wrong thing at the restaurant. Oh my God. The amount I can tell about someone when I sit down at a restaurant with them is baffling. Like, well, does this come with this? I just, you know what? Like, I just don't know. Should I get the poke bowl or should I get the hummus? It's like, you should get a fucking clue, dog. Like, it's almost over, homie. Like, we're at the right time interval. We're all dead, right? Like, you gotta move the consequences. So if you're someone who's been sitting on the fence, and this is like the facade of doing things difficult is so alluring to people that the options that are at someone's feet are do 75 hard or move into your own apartment. It's like, if you do not live by yourself and you're contemplating doing 75 hard, you know what's hard? First 75 days of living by yourself. Like, that is far. I remember,
motherfucker.
Right. I remember moving into dorms at university in Toronto when I was, I don't know, what are you, 18?
Yeah.
And my parents, they like dropped me off and they like moved me in. It was all furnished, whatever, brought my clothes up. And then like, hey, do you need anything? We'll go to the grocery store. And I was like, no. They're like, well, we'll like do your first run of groceries. I'm like, what good is that going to do? What good is that? Like, seriously. They're like, well, it's snowing outside. And I'm like, yeah. And it'll be snowing next week when y'all not here. And I got to walk to the grocery store. So off I went with 2 gym bags over the shoulder to the grocery store, 24 pack of Gatorade over the shoulder, 1 thing filled of ground meat, 1 thing filled of rice and potatoes. And I fucking walked through, because it's like, I know I can overcome that. But look, there's some days. I had one the other day. These days, because I text you, I'm like, yo, dog, I'm not doing okay. And you're like, everything's going to be fine, dog. Where the thing that I do is I unsubscribe to emails in my inbox.
Oh, yeah.
That's like, how many times have I said that? Like, that's a marker of like, okay, at least, like, if I don't know where my legs are. I don't feel like I can move. I'm so disoriented in time and space. If I can grab my phone, and at the very least, I don't get another, WeWork fucking subscription email. I was like, all right, well, I've moved and I've done one thing, right? Too many people are trying to, either partake in something that is a facade of something difficult, cold plunges, 75 hard, all of these things, rather than actually doing the thing. And the reason they don't do the thing is because they don't know how to calibrate the amount of failure that they can tolerate. And it's like, you gotta play a hand, man. Like, you gotta play a hand, right? And you'll figure out how big of L's you can take. And it's about, okay, taking less big of L's, not even stacking wins for a lot of people. It's like, can I make these L's less painful, or can I tolerate more pain? Then you recalibrate and you ante up. Because like, the habit I think people our age need to get into is not the, drop the shoulder, run through walls type thing. Although if you've accumulated that type of mentality by now, that'll see you well. But it's like, I know people who get through hard times and then they forget about the necessity of going through hard times to make times easier. And then I see people in their 40s and 50s who haven't been paying attention to that, right? They've been living off the interest. And it's like, yo, you got to feed that machine, dog, because you don't want that shit coming back. Because I'm going to pull up the statistics and I'm going to try and Google search it in a way that's unbiased. But I have a feeling that our old friend, the noose, reemerges later in life for a lot of people and would reemerge as a cause of death later. And what does that come from? It comes from forgetting that it's not about doing things hard as they come to you. It's about seeking them out.
Right. And that's that finding that purpose and meaning. But also along the same lines of what you're saying is like, yeah, you're going to take a lot of L's, especially when you have big goals and you want to overreach, but they're only L's if you let them be. Like, they're only L's if you don't learn from them. Because I mean, just using the business for an example, how many times have we fucked shit up? Like, we've been fucking shit up since day one, and we've just been fucking up. What's up?
I said 4 times today. I counted.
Right. Yeah. And it's just been less and less along the way, and we'll try new things and we'll do them more right now than maybe we would have 10 years ago. I fucking hope so. But the thing is, like, you're not going to do things right the first time. So as long as you learn from it, it's not like you're just losing the whole way. It's like, okay, you're learning the whole time. And if you take those lessons and you can build upon them and you can do things that are going to allow you to, again, find that purpose, find that meaning, continue to chase that with the knowledge that you acquire from falling short the time before and the time before, then that's how you become successful. And that's how you find purpose and meaning in the thing that you're doing on a continual basis.
CDC.gov, suicide rates and statistics. People ages 85 and older are the highest rates of suicide in 2022.
Yeah. That's wild. I mean, I get it though.
Longevity thing.
Yeah. I've told you how I want to leave this earth.
We have a plan. It starts in Stuttgart. We know. We did this yesterday.
I know. Oh, fuck.
But it's like, if I were to, and look, 85 today is a lot different than what 85 is going to look like in 50 years, right? When we're 85.
Yeah.
But like, I can guarantee you that principle of like, think of the 85-year-olds that if many or any that are doing well, there's definitely a physical practice, a component to it, right? Like they are active in some way, shape, or form, but they also endure, they partake in things that have a competitive component to it, right? Like there's more like, and this is where I think people lose the plot. Like, you can compete with yourself, but there is something well, it's not something like it is quite literally the driver of competition is the driver of evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally.
By definition, right? Like you outcompeted someone else. Like the Finches weren't like, yo, it's me versus me out there. It's like, no, bitch. It's like the Finch with one beak and the Finch with the other. It's not you versus you. Like, I think of some of the healthiest, oldest people I know. One comes to mind, Bill DeMontier. Shout out Dr. D.
Yeah.
Dr. D's homeboy kept me from getting kicked out of school. So Dr. D, I owe you one for real. So appreciate that forever. But Dr. D's got to be pushing 80, right?
Okay, he's up there.
He's for sure. But he competes in 100. And you ask him, 100 milers, dog. And like, you ask D, and this is what I fucking love about him, is you ask him how he went, and he tells you his placing. I was like, fuck yes, right? Because it's like, that is what drives evolution. That's what fitness is. Right. Yeah. The ability to survive is the ability to survive compared to something else. That's how we got here, where some things didn't survive, but whatever genes we have survived. Like, so like, I was competitive in weightlifting after I got out of hockey. And then out of weightlifting, or out of powerlifting rather, I got really competitive in business. Right. Mm-hmm. And we talk about our numbers and all that, but like, we compete in a market. We know our competitors. Right. We know who we're coming for. You guys might not be privy. You guys obviously aren't privy to these conversations, but like, you better believe that, there's a cork board in my office somewhere with organizations and names and faces of people that I want to dethrone without a doubt. Yeah. And it's like, don't fucking lose that. Hey.
Yeah.
Because like, and I think that's where a lot of the nerfing of the psychology comes from, is like this you versus you. No, it's not. It's never been that. That's not how we got here, right? Like the finch wasn't screaming words of affirmation into the reflective pond. It was like, I hope if it's gonna be me or this fucking guy, it's gonna be this fucking guy, right? Like, fuck, this guy's dead. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's a good calibration tool. Like I've had people reach out when we do podcasts like this, like, how do you know if it's something fulfilling? It's like, because there's a consequence to fucking it up. And the size of the consequence gauges the magnitude of the return.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say that makes it fulfilling though. Like fulfilling is so subjective. Like if you don't know if it's fulfilling, it's not fulfilling. Like you only know if it is fulfilling, right? So if you don't feel fulfilled in doing what you're doing, then it's not fulfilling, and you know that because you're not fulfilled.
Right. Yeah, I like the idea of like, I think, and sacrifice is not a word that I like throwing around, but like the magnitude of the relative sacrifice scales the magnitude of the reward of what you're sacrificing for, because that's how you calibrate the magnitude of the thing you're sacrificing, is that it's offering itself in service for something else that you see greater than the thing you're giving up. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like,
Yeah.
that's usually a good point of calibration. I just, people are so shit scared to do fucking anything anymore. It's like, bro, I know people, we know people that are too afraid to post on Instagram. And look, I don't want to be disparaging, because I understand it, right? There was a point where we were getting off the ground and a mean comment would have been destabilizing. Like, but it's, dude, you got to understand that's step zero, right?
Yeah.
That's step zero. And there's a lot of steps, but you got to get over that fucking step as fast as you can, homie. Like, because there's a whole world waiting for you on the other side of that doorstep. Like you got to sort that out.
Right. Yeah. It comes back to dealing with stressors. Like that's a very minor stressor in the scheme of running a business. Like if you can't deal with someone saying something to you online, like how the fuck are you going to deal with having to pay salaries when you don't have money coming in? Like you got to figure some shit out. And like it starts with small shit like that too, is you got to understand how to deal with these stressors and how to take action to alleviate these stressors. And then the stressors get bigger and bigger, but the process doesn't change. You understand the process of dealing with stressors. So it doesn't matter if the stressor is bigger, it might be a more complex process in dealing with it. But if you can sort that out and you can figure that out, that scales.
Yeah. And rarely are you met with a stress that you haven't been like, the absolute magnitude of the stressors we deal with now and the consequences we deal with now. We've just been two frogs boiling in water. We don't, sometimes it's hard to recognize that we're slowly boiling to death, because it just has been this very gradual process of like, hey, we are in this situation where we're dealing with more incremental stress because we've dealt with stress incrementally, right? So as we get to this point, sometimes it's like watching people. Have you ever been to that thing in New York, like that lookout peak in New York, where it's like glass floor and it's, I don't know, maybe you're 70 floors up or something like that? Like,
No, I've never been.
well, okay, how about this? When we went on that rope bridge in Vancouver over that gorge,
Yeah.
right? Like you watch people step out from the ledge onto the rope bridge and you see like the trepidation. Or in this case in New York, or the Burj Khalifa is one that comes to mind. That's like you're 155 stories up. Watching people walk out onto the portion of the floor that's just clear, not realizing that the portion of the floor they're currently standing on is of the same risk. And you watch them just like get down on their knees and crawl on the clear floor. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? It's the same fucking floor. You can just see through it, right? Like I see people as they ascend through stress and they start to look too far back or too far ahead. They get the bit of that physiological speed wobbles or psychological speed wobbles. It's like, I think an asset that helped me is focus, right? Like you need to be hyper focused on the thing you need to do. Like if you're focusing on putting one foot in front of the other and you're walking, it doesn't matter if the floor is clear or it's not, you're still 150 floors up. The risk is the exact same, right? But when people zoom out too much, and it's like, and I think too, this is part of, like something with these 25-year-old fucking kids, like people are zooming out too much. It's like, you have nothing to zoom out to. You're 25 years old. You have nothing to reflect on. Stop reflecting. Mm-hmm. Start focusing on the next thing that you have to do and do that. Right. Like people are like, they look too far out into the horizon and they get all discoordinated or uncoordinated. They get disoriented. Sorry. And it's like, yeah, look, that the way there is the next step. Focus on that. Right. So in overcoming stressful things, and I think business has taught me, at least, and I feel like I speak for both of us, it's like it teaches you to be very immediate, very deliberate, very intentional, where it's like, I don't really care. Like, like we've done the increments of money that we deal with, and the thought of getting things wrong or missing a date now are like more, honestly, and I speak for myself, but I think you'll agree, are more than we ever thought we would deal with in our entire life. If I were to like zoom out and be like, man, fucking 10-year-old me never could have imagined, like, I don't want to lose this opportunity. Like, fuck the dude, like this would be enough. We could both pay off our student loans and like, fuck it. Let's just do that. And like, let's just run away from it, dude. Like, let's just cash in our chips now. Like, we've never, ever come near the thought of it. It's like, I don't even have to ask. You don't even have to ask. We come up to some opportunity where it's like, yo, this could cost us like a lot of money. And if this doesn't work, that money we could have fucking put in our pockets, paid off grad school, maybe fucking buy a house somewhere, and we'd be chilling. Only now, actually, in having this reflective conversation, do I realize how many opportunities we've had to do that. But we've never succumbed to it, right? And it's like, because we've been met and we are not been met, we meet these incremental stressors with the focus necessary to overcome them. And, with the understanding that, you can't celebrate these victories, right? Like you can't waste time resting on your laurels. You kind of just you gotta ante up and play your next hand, right? And that's where I see a lot of people just miss the boat. It's like, you got to focus. You got to stop with this, and reflecting comes in various disguises, and figuring out your mental is good, but like, don't let it paralyze you, right? That's when all of the psychological practices, the therapy, the whatever people partake in, meditation, journaling, all of those things are super useful as so far as they service you into action. If they don't do that, they're working against you, like everything else is. So that for me is a good calibration tool. It's like, get your head right. And a calibrating tool of getting your head right is you're able to do more and meet more challenges. And that is what's going, if you're a male between the age, that's what's going to keep you healthy, right? Like, don't worry about fucking aluminum in your goddamn deodorant or whatever the fuck people are concerned with. Worry about getting your shit done.
Yeah.
Health.
That's it. Figure out how to solve problems and then keep doing it your entire life.
We'll do an actual health one, but I think that was an actual health one, but we'll run that back. But that's been pissing me off lately. So I'm glad you brought it up as a topic.
Of course, man. Cool. If you guys are still here, appreciate you listening. Level 1 for sale now. It is live. So sign up. Class starts January 27th. We will be looking forward to seeing you there. Like, subscribe, share it with your friends. Thanks for listening, guys. That's all I got.
What he said.